Tonight's You and Your Money is brought to you by Arwa Court Development, Cole Insurance, Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, Bahamas Waste, J.S. Johnson Insurance Company, and the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation.
Good evening, and welcome to You and Your Money. I'm your host for this evening's show, Mr. Javon Butler, and my very special guest is Mr. Edison Sumner, the CEO of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation. Yes. Good evening, Mr. Sumner.
Good evening, sir.
How are you this evening?
Wonderful. So it's always good being back in your company.
Well, thank you. Same here.
It's good being around smart people.
Well, we do try at times. now, Mr. Sumner, let's get straight to the crux of the matter. A lot of individuals are now concerned with the most recent announcement from Moody's of the potential downgrading. What is the Chamber's take? What is your take on that announcement?
Well, we had the opportunity to consider the announcement on a review for downgrade.
Correct.
It's not a downgrade, but it's simply saying that they are reviewing the situation in the country to determine whether there should be another downgrade that is going to be offered, right? But our view is that naturally the rating agencies must look at what's happening in the economy today. We know that the economy has its challenges. The government of the Bahamas has some work to do to talk about how they're going to deal with issues of fiscal disciplines, controlled spending, finding ways to increase revenue, to diversify the revenue streams in the economy. Once these things are done, we believe that we can find ourselves back on the path to getting this correction done. Okay. But it's also going to be important for the government to embrace the support of the private sector, right? And we understand and realize that the government cannot do this on its own. The private sector, through the Chamber of Commerce, recently held a conclave. And out of that, we came up with some themes that we believe are going to be useful to assist the government in arresting the declines in the economy, to deal with the declining revenue streams, deal with the deficits and the debt that the country has. But it has to be a case where the government embraces the private sector, embraces the recommendations of the private sector. And if this is done, then we can work together collaboratively to ensure that we not only working to get ourselves off of this potential further downgrade, right? That can become the sort of the results, right? The remedy is fixing the other issues, right? We will benefit by having us removed off of the downgrade list. We'll benefit by having us not having any further downgrades offered by the other ratings agencies. But for us, it's about working towards what we see as being the real economic low-hanging fruits that we can go after. Implementing those policies, ensuring that the policies of the government that they articulated are one, that they are workable, that they are implementable, and that they have the support not only of those who are working in the government system or the public sector, but also ensuring that the private sector is on board to support the government and the country at large in how we can improve the economic state of the country.
So was there an official press release from the Chamber concerning the pending review of the downgrades?
Yes, if you allow me for a moment, I would love to read just an excerpt from it. But the Chamber has a position, and we did publish a press release on this dated the 12th of July. Okay. So it reads in part that the narrative of first of all, that the Moody's Investor Services announced that it had placed a bond and issuer ratings of the Bahamas government on review for downgrade, right? It hasn't issued a downgrade, it's just a review for one. And the announcement highlights the need for a long-term national development plan which addresses challenges faced in the economy of the Bahamas and the resulting impact on the fiscal position and performance of the Bahamas government. We further stated that the narrative of the ratings action addresses the requirements for improved credibility in financial reporting with recent financial data presented in the 2017-18 budget, which had a significant difference from the projections of the midterm budget, which was presented just 3 months earlier. Okay. That raised a concern for us as well. So we think that there's meaningful analysis needed of the fiscal affairs of the country that requires the current, complete and accurate financial data which can only be achieved by the adoption of modern accounting practices for financial reporting, namely the International Public Sector Accounting Standards, which require accrual-based accounting and would prevent the debate over which administration, because that's a thing we heard this finger pointing back and forth, the administration which incurred obligations that are not recorded until settled in the future.
So the accrual-based accounting, why is it that we have not moved away from the cash-based accounting to an accrual-based accounting?
Well, that's a good question. It is something that was raised by the Chamber before. When we looked at the 2016 budget, we made the recommendation then that we should move to accrual-based accounting. I know that BICA also supports that position, that we should be moving to accrual-based accounting, and they are the experts in that area, right? So we are hopeful that the government is now paying attention to this, and that by the next year or two, may take more than a year to get to that, but perhaps in a couple of years, we can see the government accounting systems and public financial management systems moving towards that accrual-based accounting process. I think it may happen because just a day or two ago, the government launched the public financial management systems in the country, which is looking at things like the public procurement process, looking at how the government financial systems are managed going forward, budgeting processes, etc. The Chamber is very engaged in that process as well. And one of the initiatives that we're going to be suggesting very strongly, if it isn't on the agenda yet, is that the government should look now to move towards accrual-based accounting rather than cash-based accounting. We think that may happen in the near future.
Now, for the layman listening, the fundamental difference between the cash-based and accrual-based accounting in terms of the government's position, what does it allow the government to do in a more timely fashion if they move to accrual-based?
In very simple one statement, one line, it allows them to present more accurate accounts on the financial state of the country. That's the simplest I can put it, right? So that you don't have issues where liabilities might be incurred in one period and being offset in another period, or vice versa. But the very simple response to that is that this new system of accrual-based accounting allows the government to present more accurate, more present or current records of the state of the financial situation in the country.
You've mentioned that the national development, the long-term position. What are some of the low-hanging fruit, as you stated, that we can grab right now?
Well, I think coming out of our, let me put it this way, in June of last month, the Chamber held its 4th annual National Conclave of Chambers of Commerce in the Bahamas. The whole theme around that conclave was dealing entirely with the ease of doing business, all right, and what all that entails. And we came out of that conclave with 14 or so thematic points or areas of priority that the Chamber wants to address, and also addressing issues with the government. The good thing is that in that conclave, we had members of the government who were present, who came in to have dialogue and discussions with us during the process. And some of the low-hanging fruits that we thought we can look at going after, and again, I'd like to just sort of highlight them for you, are that we're looking at areas that we can assist the government with on, for example, the need for a comprehensive government ICT platform.
And that would be?
Information, communications, and technology. Right? How we can enhance that and is moving more towards an e-government system of operations. We think that's the way that it ought to be going. 2, we also talked about civil service, human resources development and support to include the enhancement of the process. Right? How do we look at the civil service, and how do we support a revision or review of the civil service to ensure that it's operating at its optimum capacity? Because right now we think that there may be some gaps that may need to be filled by and within the civil service.
Now, Edison, I'm going to take this first commercial break. And I want you to go through all of these points for us.
Certainly.
You are tuned into You and Your Money. We'll be back after this brief commercial break.
So who really own the Nassau Container Port?
Boss, that's easy. The government.
I do.
I do. I do.
I do. And one day, he will too. I do. Knock knock.
Here at the Nassau Container Port, we've diversified our ownership to give hardworking Bahamians a piece of the economic pie. And we'll continue to grow so that we can give you a consistent return on your investment. That's our promise.
Today is a day for fun. Today is a day for family, so why should yesterday's worries affect my today? That's why I insure my family with J.S. Johnson, because their mission is to provide us with the best insurance coverage possible. With J.S. Johnson, I know my family comes first, so I take comfort in knowing that they always have us covered, providing us with a great today and an even better tomorrow.
J.S. Johnson Insurance Agents and Brokers, giving you peace of mind.
Your insurance policy is a legal contract between you and your insurer. When purchasing insurance, make sure that you give your agent all the details and that you fully understand the contract. Pay your premium on time and keep your contract and all receipts in a safe place. Any breach of the contract could result in cancellation of the policy or non-payment of a claim. And failing to make payments can cause your policy to lapse. For more information, visit www.icb.gov.bs. This message was brought to you by the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas.
Back to you and your money. Mr. Sumner, we left off with some of the initiatives that the Chamber mentioned at the conclave in June. I want you to continue down along that line.
Yeah, so some of the other, like I said, we had the opportunity to discuss a number of themes, engaging with our counterparts in government, civil society, business community, etc. And we had people coming in from the Family Islands as well. Okay. And it was important for this to happen because it was good for us to get so many diverse ideas and opinions that we now have collaborated, pulled together. We are now generating a full report coming out of that conclave, which will be presented to the government, the chamber members, etc. And that will highlight what we saw as being some of the challenges that were encountered, and also putting in what we see as being some of the workable solutions. So one of the things that the chamber always tries not to do is to criticize a position or a situation without offering a solution at the same time. So some of the other areas that we talked about coming out of the conclave that we think are low-hanging fruits that will improve the situation in the country has to do with fiscal responsibility, including legislation and accountability for financial performance that we talked about. Yeah. We looked at the budget. Reduction in the bureaucracy in processes involving government ministries, departments, and agencies.
Now, I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
How do we, I know we won't eliminate it, but how do we reduce the bureaucracy in the government departments and agencies?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because I just gave this speech yesterday. Okay. I think it's important for us to understand what is the role of the public sector, right? What are the roles of individuals operating in the various government departments in the government. And I think once we understand what their roles are, and once they understand, because a lot of them coming out of the conclave, it was apparent to us that many of them were not fully cognizant or did not fully comprehend what their roles were. And so if you have frustrations coming in from those who are working in the system, imagine what the frustration is for those of us who are trying to get access to the services. So we think that understanding what the roles are, collaborating as we have been doing with the public-private sector through public-private sector dialogue and partnerships, and also identifying ways that we can minimize the challenges that are being faced within the public service, and also identify ways that the private sector can assist the public sector in fulfilling its full mandate. Okay. And that means looking at overhauling the civil service, perhaps. We learned through the exercise of the National Development Plan, for example, that up to 40% of persons working in the civil service are either considered still temporary workers, clerical workers, or listed as miscellaneous, which means that there are a number of persons working in the public sector who are still not given the benefit of being considered permanent and pensionable employees or civil servants. Those are issues that need to be looked at. And I think that the government, from what I understand, is now looking at ways that they can correct that situation. And that means potentially, not necessarily, but potentially that the public service could be as much as 20 to 30% overcapacitated.
Explain the balance where the private sector then has to pick up that slack if we have to minimize the size of our public service.
Well, in the first instance, the private sector already employs well over 65% of the workforce in the country. Okay. The government's workforce contribution to others somewhere around 18 to 20% or so. And then you have you have the list of those who are employed persons. You've got the civil servants. Then you have what we call the entrepreneurs or sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, etc. Right? So out of that whole mix, the government civil service accounts for roughly 20% or so of the workforce in the country. So the private sector is already absorbing the other up to 80% or so, 60 to 80% of the workforce. So it is not the intention to displace anyone, right? Everybody needs to work. When we talk about rising unemployment levels, it has other consequences. You're talking about Social Security benefits having to now be meted out. You're talking about other strain on the government system and the private sector. So it's not about displacing persons. It's about finding the right fit, right? Finding the right persons to work in the right jobs with the right skill sets and the right qualifications to ensure that all of the mandate, not only in the public sector, but the private sector as well, that the mandate for the private sector, the public sector is being met. And if it means having to go through, as we've seen with one particular ministry so far, going through a human resources audit, understanding what you're working with, right? Understanding what it is that you need. Because you might find that the number of persons working in the civil service now, or the public service, may be inadequate. But we have to, I think, from our perspective, we have to clearly understand and I think clearly define what is the role of the public sector and what is the role of the private sector. And in this context, the private sector's role is to support the public sector to ensure that the work gets done, but also to ensure that we are making the right recommendations, putting in the right measures to ensure that we are promoting ease of doing business and all that that entails, right? And it may be having to review the public sector. It may have to look at how we can reduce the cost of energy in the country, increasing the level of employability by promoting skills and productivity training within the workforce, both on the public and the private side. It's about how we provide the right and adequate compensation for persons who are working in the workforce, and also providing other means of incentives, right? Because an incentives doesn't necessarily mean financial remuneration. Sometimes your incentive might simply be giving me the tools I need to work with, right? Putting me in a comfortable environment that I need to work within, not putting me in a place where I'm working under a leaking desk or having to fight to get a pen or pencil to do my work with. But there are different ways to incentivize people to get the work done. And when you have a workforce, no matter where it is, whether it's on the private side or the public side, and the morale is low, and they don't feel that they're being appreciated for the work that they're doing, outside of collecting a salary at the end of the week or month, then you're not going to get the level of productivity that you're looking for. So for us, it's about increasing incentives, increasing how we can motivate our workforce to increase the output that we're looking for.
Now, we are going to continue down the listing from the conclave, but we have to take this commercial break.
Sure.
We'll be back right after this brief commercial break.
It is never easy to witness nature's wrath. One single named path of destruction over the course of a few hours, sometimes minutes, sometimes seconds, can change your life forever. There's nothing you can do to prevent a hurricane from being destructive by nature. But there is something you can do to protect your assets and ensure safety for not only yourself, but also the ones you love. When disaster strikes, be prepared. J.S. Johnson Insurance Agents and Brokers, giving you peace of mind.
The Insurance Commission of the Bahamas wants you to know your policy. Before you sign, read every line. Ask your insurance agent, broker, or salesperson as many questions as you need to. Know your policy. This message was brought to you by the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas. The Commission regulates all insurance companies, agents, brokers, and salespersons to protect the interests of policyholders. For more information on what to look for when purchasing a policy, visit www.icb.gov.bs.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. I'm your host this evening, Mr. Javon Butler, and once again, Mr. Edison Sumner, the CEO of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation.
Yes.
Mr. Sumner, you're giving us so much information. I want you to highlight the other points that came out of the conclave before we continue the conversation.
Sure. I'll just give you one or two others. We talked about how we can reduce the level of bureaucracy and improving efficiencies in systems across the board. We also talked about how we can promote now the public-private partnerships and dialogue. And that, I think, will go a long way to showing how and we've seen it happen very effectively before when we saw the collaboration between the government and the private sector via the chamber in addressing some other issues, right? When it came to, for example, the value-added tax implementation or the minimum wage increase that was done back in 2015, or more recently when we talked about the amendments to the Employment Act and the Industrial Relations Act, showed that when you can collaborate, right, rather than always opposing, but collaborate on ideas and various positions, that we can get a lot more traction going in those kinds of instances. So promoting public-private partnerships and dialogue is something that we would like to continue to push. Energy reform has always been at the top of our list of consideration because we're still grappling with the high cost of energy. The Bahamas, believe it or not, is really amongst the top 10% or higher in the world when it comes to the cost of energy. And there's no sustainable reason for it. I mean, if we continue on this path, we are never going to attract the kind of investors that we need to attract who can set up plants and other businesses in the country, because the cost of energy is still considered to be extremely high.
But you're mentioning the international investors. For the domestic business persons?
Well, for the domestic business persons, the difference is between the international investor and the local investor is that the international investor doesn't have to come here.
That too is true.
The domestic investor lives here, right? So anything we do is going to inure to the benefit of the local Bahamian business community first. But the difference being that while we live here and we have to contend with the situation until we can improve it, the international investor may decide, I just don't want to go there in the first place because the cost of doing business in that country is too high. I've had this conversation before with Latin business persons when I was in Panama a year or two ago, and they cited one of the reasons that they could not do business in the Bahamas was that the cost of energy was too high compared to the other business jurisdictions where they're paying a fraction of the cost to do business in other countries in the jurisdiction, whether it's in Latin America or the Caribbean. So we are working on energy reform. We are talking about the promotion potentially of renewables, like solar energy, etc., or we're looking at LNG plants, improving the facilities at both Blue Hills and the Clifton plant, causing them to generate and produce and distribute clean energy rather than what they've been using in the past with this bunker, sea fuel, and the rest of it, which is not really that good for the economy. It's very expensive to manage. It's also going to be a case about how we can maintain the equipment that we have now, the generating equipment, the plant and machinery, to ensure that we're getting the best use and optimizing the efficiency of that equipment as well.
What I don't understand, when we talk about alternative energy, solar, sun, Bahamas, wind,
it's a natural
Bahamas.
fit, right?
Yes. When we talk about current,
yes.
The last time you passed the glass bottom bridge,
yeah.
That's a beautiful current there in Eleuthera.
It is, and so, it's current Eleuthera.
Yes. So why is it that it is taking us so long to buy into alternative energy?
Well, I think it is because we haven't come to the full appreciation yet of what that means for the country, right? There has to be some policy decisions that must be made by the government. There is a energy sector policy that was introduced by the previous administration, I think it was in 2014 or 15. We had an opportunity to have some input into that document, but it still hasn't been fully implemented. And we know that now ERCA, who in the past have been mostly regulating the telecoms industry, have now been given mandate to manage and to regulate the electricity industry as well, or the energy sector. And I know that they're now putting measures in place to ensure that we can look at things like renewables, like LNG facilities, for example. And we know that there have been proposals submitted to the government in the past to talk about how we can put in and install energy efficient systems in the country that all of us can benefit from. But as it stands now, the cost of energy, the efficiency of energy, still having to deal with blackouts on a daily basis, it's unacceptable in this day and age. And it is necessary for not only for those who who are generating energy now and distributing it, like BPL, to get the act together as far as this distribution is concerned. But it's also important now to give others who can generate energy through renewables, through LNG, to give them an opportunity to begin doing that. And we can pull up a list now of persons in the country who qualified to start doing solar installations and being able to use that on a commercial basis to get customers on solar systems and get them off of the current grid. That's a process that we're working through.
Okay.
It's an onerous process. There are some hoops that we've got to jump through to get things done. But I think we're beginning to see some progress being made in that area. And I'm hopeful that as we continue the discussion and dialogue, that we can see a real transformation in our energy sector to allow us to take advantage of those same kinds of renewables that you mentioned a moment ago.
So you've mentioned several of the initiatives that the Chamber definitely wants to focus on going forward. Energy being at the top of that ladder.
Yes.
Where can I find out more about these initiatives? What's your website? How do I get in contact with the Chamber? How do I become a member of the Chamber?
Yeah, well, the Chamber, all of the information that we're talking about is being put into publishable format now, where it's going to be posted to the Chamber's website very shortly. Okay. The full report of the conclave will be posted as soon as we're completed with its editing. That should be done within the next week or two. It's going to be all made available to the public through posting on the website, social media. We'll announce when it's going to be given out, and that's going to be at the BahamasChamber.com, right? Okay. TheBahamasChamber.com. To become a member of the Chamber, it's a simple process. You contact the Chamber. There's a membership application form you must complete. It's given review and vetting very quickly by myself and reference to the board. And once we have a chance to vet it, we just contact the member and just say, listen, you've been accepted into the membership. Or if you have an issue or challenge with your application, we'll let you know what that is. Okay. But the idea is to continue to grow the membership, because the strength of the Chamber, the influence of the Chamber is directly correlated to the membership of the Chamber. We do what we do for the membership, we do what we do for the general business community, and we do what we do to assist in growing and building the economy of the country. The decisions are not always easy, and you don't always get it right the first time. But it's important for us, through research, through empirical data, through consultation, and through collaboration with the government. And we do have a very open door policy with the government to continue discussing ways that we can improve our economy. So yeah, just come into the Chamber, give us a call, 322-2145, or email us at admin@thebahamaschamber.com. We'd love to invite more members to come in to help us build our capacity, get more opinions coming in to help us to form our positions on various matters and subjects, so that we can continue to strengthen our resolve within the organization and also provide the assistance that we need to provide to the growth of our economy.
Mr. Sumner, thank you again.
Always
a pleasure.
Thank you again.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
And we will have you back.
I look forward to it.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful episode of You and Your Money. Have a good evening.
You and Your Money was brought to you by Arawa Port Development, Coal Insurance, Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, Bahamas Waste, J.S. Johnson Insurance Company, and the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation.